John, since Derwent started in the 1980s, obviously the development sector has changed. There have been peaks, troughs, downturns, recessions, and so on. How have you seen Derwent's business change over time?
Well, as you said, we started in about 1984. Things were much slower in those days. Everything was a much slower pace. And we were prepared to push things along. If we saw something to buy, we'd go and buy it. We normally had the finance in place. So the pace has really got on. And the style of the business changed from being managers, as I said before, to regenerators and ultimately developers, was really based on what space do people want. I think we were rather good at that, knowing what the market wanted. The market was tired of straightforward buildings, unattractive buildings. Not a lot of thought was put into them, and we were prepared to spend that little bit more time in creating a product. And that product, I hope, has turned into a brand. When I started off, there was a company called Hazelmere that used to regenerate or refurbish traditional period buildings. It was called doing a Hazelmere. But I do think that now it is doing a Derwent, and it's up there. But of course, we have a lot of competition these days because everybody else is getting involved, trying to create good space and make it exciting. Knowing what your occupier wants is absolutely critical. And we have just moved it on from there. Looking ahead, straight through to technology, sending our teams abroad to compare our space with other people, like when you're going to Palo Alto, things like that have been terribly important, going to New York, going to Europe, making sure that we have the correct product, and working with great teams of people, up-and-coming people. A lot of them have now become architects, as they say, but like us, they started in a much smaller way, and we still work with them. But it's always been on the emphasis of good product and moving towards much greener buildings, looking ahead to the next generation. We're looking at smart buildings. You hope that when you start a development now, that in 3 years' time, when it's completed, that it's got all the right things with it. And I think that is a bit of a worry, is keeping up with technology.
Yes, I mean, would you say now, as technology has moved on, of course, technology has got smaller, if you like, and yet more powerful. So the days of large raised floors in dealing rooms and so on is gone, long gone.
Sure.
In terms of future-proofing your buildings and looking forward to the next decade, how do you feel that your buildings are set for that?
Well, we don't do raised floors. We like volume and light, as you know, tremendous height, entrances like that. I think we're well served with it. We're keeping up with it. The whole time, as you say, you need less space for all the kit. It's moving away from seeing all the kit enormous on air conditioning, chilling like that, on roofs and things like that. That has altered considerably. It's just knowing, it's seeing buildings, taking ideas, kicking them around and seeing what happens. And I think if you retain an enthusiasm, you're going to learn the whole time. You must never be complacent with buildings. We have built some really, what I call landmark buildings, but it's always been the challenge. That was good. Let's get on with the next one. Let's make it a bit better. What lessons have we learnt from this? What would we do differently? And always on the emphasis that our buildings should not be what you call typically corporate. And that's probably why we've never done anything in the city core on that basis, which is a very specialised market and probably more cyclical. We've always looked to do interesting things with buildings.
And how do you see, if you could put your sort of glasses of future gazing glasses on, how do you see the next 10 years in terms of the sectors that Derwent works in?
Well, I think it's going to be very much the same of creating great space. It's a question of finding the buildings and the locations. I don't think we want to do anything very different. We must have good height and light in the buildings, good locations, connectivity, terribly important. We are prepared to push out a little with Crossrail, but it would have to be pretty accessible.
Yes.
Again, you know, there are no particular areas that we haven't covered in London, except like a number of black cab drivers, we haven't gone south of the river, only on one or two occasions. Yeah. And I think we've missed a trick there, but we've done okay on the north. But it's really the interesting buildings that generate through all the staff and everybody being involved with these projects.
Yes.
And I think as long as we retain that and we have a bit of fire in our belly for transactions, that's going to sustain. I think buildings are becoming simpler in many ways as they become smart.
Yes.
And we will be able to do everything off a tablet at some stage. Quite frightening, but anyway.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And in terms of new projects, and again looking at the next 10 years, do you and Derwent as well look at current market trends and adapt them, or do you still, like you were in the 80s and 90s and pretty well all the way through Derwent's life, be leaders in that? So you mentioned going out to California and New York to take ideas from around the world and be the first to put them into practice.
I think basically what we're doing there is measuring them. And when people come back, they say, well, we're not doing too bad. In fact, our space is equally as good and probably a little bit better. So I think that's what's happening. All the time we're looking to move ahead on that basis, absolutely. To make every building, as I sort of repeat myself, more interesting.
Yes.
And nothing specific. We're looking at life science now, which is becoming interesting in the knowledge area. We have one or two buildings that may be of interest in the future for that.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Good.